Welcome to the adventures of self. Conversations with ordinary and extraordinary people as they explore what it means to be self-expressed. Come on in. Join the adventure. So, welcome, Lily Walford, to the Adventures of Self.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited for our talk today.
I can see it's coming out just in the first moments. Sorry to put you on the spot, but what's exciting for you?
It's exciting. I think it's sharing this concept of allowing people to enjoy, relationships and to enjoy that connection with themselves and to enjoy that connection with others. And yeah, I think a big part of my journey was I felt so disconnected from people.
Mm.
And it's knowing that I wasn't the only person to go through it. So to allow people to realize that there is that possibility of reconnecting more with yourself and reconnecting with people around you is pretty exciting to share.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely, and I think because we were talking about this before we got started, and it's interesting because I think we often feel we can feel disconnected to the world, we can feel disconnected to others. You're an international dating coach, so we can feel disconnected to partners or potential partners, and and we think I think sometimes that it's because of me, it's my thing, and that somehow I've got to do something or be something different to make these connections. And what you offer right there is this, starting with connection to yourself.
Yes, yes. And I love that you kind of brought up about like, needing to be or needing to do something
Mm.
in order to connect. And it was quite funny. Yesterday I had this conversation with someone around conditional and unconditional love.
Mm.
And there's this element of that always comes back to childhood of that we have to work for love, or we have to be something for love, or we have to say or do things, or whatever it might be. And people often get uncomfortable with the concept of unconditional love. Being loved even if you're having an argument, being
Mm.
loved for, also being loved for who you are at that identity level. And I think it kind of opens up this almost vulnerability of being seen for who you really are. And I don't think many people get to that stage within their relationships.
Well, yeah, and I think it goes to, we start with ourselves,
Mm.
and a lot of us don't want to start with ourselves. we
Yes.
we we want to put it on, oh, it's Lily's responsibility to make me feel good in this relationship. It's Lily's responsibility to be vulnerable and to,
Mm.
and yeah, there's this tension and balance, because what I've found in my own experience in relationships, I definitely grew up in a very conditional love environment. I love my mom to death, but it was the two of us, and we had and it was a lot of conditional love, and
Mm.
so it's a model that I learned, and she's got her own issues and pain to deal with, and I've got a great relationship with her, but I do recognize that what I learned, what was modeled for me, was very conditional love. And so
Mm.
the early relationships that I got into, even if I get into them, which was by no means a sure thing, I I definitely looked for or created conditionality
Yeah.
for the love, not only that I gave, but the love that I received. Like, I was not able to, as you say, I was not able to receive unconditional love, because if unconditional love came at me, I my alarm bells went up and said, well, what's wrong with this person? Where's the punchline? What's going on? Who set this person up? This doesn't make any sense to me.
yes. And I love the fact that you've brought that up, because I think so many people relate to that. It's like that thing of, when you give someone a compliment, or a stranger gives you a compliment, and it's like, oh, what is this? What do I do with this? Oh, well, that's weird. You kind of brush it off. And it's kind of allowing people to kind of come back to remembering, where does that love actually come from? Where does that comment, where does that thing actually come from? And what would have to inspire you as a person to be able to say that to someone?
Mm.
And it comes back to that thing of being more present and more connected with yourself, and also understanding the emotional side of it, because it's easy to hear the words and brush it off, but it's harder to notice the emotions and to feel the emotions, which is often something that we choose to ignore.
Mm. Yeah, and I do think it comes to this sense of how you are in yourself.
Mm,
Like I say, whenever I had relationships and I received love, particularly some kind of unconditional love, I really didn't understand it,
mm,
and it seemed suspect to me. It seemed like the person wanted something from me when all they wanted to do was give love.
yeah.
And so I destroyed many relationships. I'm sure they destroyed some relationships with me as well. But um, through my own growth, and this is a common sort of theme that I think comes out in a lot of different teachings and a lot of different areas. We're talking, your area is specifically around dating, but I think it comes in with your relationship with your family,
Mhm.
at work. And we sort of forget that we have to start with ourselves. And when you love yourself, when you appreciate yourself, when you're not trying to prove something to yourself, you start to show up like that with and around other people. And so there are times when people may say things that are over flattering, and maybe they are trying to get something from you, and so you kind of think, okay, why is this person saying this? And then you kind of get a sense, there's an energy, there's like a feel, a vibration of what somebody's saying. And if somebody genuinely says something that's complimentary and loving, when you have a sense of solid ownership of who you are, all of who you are, not that you're for me, I mean, not that I'm the most amazing person that never does anything wrong, but I can appreciate the things that I do well,
Mm,
and hear that reflected back,
yeah,
and
it's
receive that, like to actually, like I notice, the that because there was this moment, or series of moments, right, when I would hear compliments, or some kind of love, or any thing, and there's a sense of like, oh, I've got to, cool, I'll accept that, but now I have to give it back. Oh, you're wonderful too. Oh yeah, and you do this so well. And we're kind of in this, well, this person's given me something, so I have to give something directly back right here, right now. And maybe that's appropriate, but to really receive something and just sit with it, to just own it, to that's a really interesting and relatively new practice for me. I mean, in the last few years, I'd say.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think so many people will resonate with that, being able to actually understand the true concept of love. And it was quite funny. I did a bit of research of, finding out if it's easier to give or receive love. And I kind of already knew where it was going to go, but it's always good to put it out there and see what people said. And one person said, put a comment there that really grabbed my attention. They said that the scariest thing to do is actually receive love, because you don't know where it's coming from. When you're
Wow.
giving it, you know where it's coming from. Yeah. And I think that's got so much to do with, the levels of trust, and also things like commitment. I mean, you cannot have, you can't receive love if there's not that trust, but not from the other person, but the trust from yourself.
Mm,
There's often things like, betrayal, or anything where people do something outside your expectations. It's not the fact that the person's done it, it's feeling uneasy or unclear, on what your behavior or actions would have to be as a result.
Hmm.
So, if you've been betrayed or cheated on or anything like that, it's the fear of, okay, what do I have to do now? Because I don't know what to do.
Mm.
And it's that uncertainty and that uneasiness that people struggle with.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of confusion. I mean,
Mm,
I've been in relationships of betrayal, um, because there's a blaming or
yeah,
a questioning of what did I do to deserve this, and then I think, as you say, the sense of what do I do now with
yeah,
this in the relationship. But then if that relationship ends, then really, I mean, I stayed away from any meaningful relationship for years, after betrayal.
yeah. And it comes back to this thing. So I created a concept of the 4 C's for healthy relationships, and mine are compatibility, communication, consideration, and collaboration. And collaboration is probably one of the most important ones to get right,
Mm,
because with a collaboration, you have to have two accountable partners who are
mhm,
both responsible for their side of the road.
mhm,
But what most people do, and this is where people struggle, is you'll have one person in that relationship who tries to be responsible for the
mm,
whole relationship. And that's where it becomes hard, because they tend to be the people, and I've been, I have been one of those people. They tend to be the people who try to control the whole thing, because there's the fear of what would that relationship say about them, but
mm.
also the looking for the safety, and the the looking for the safety within that relationship, and also looking for that level of security and stability. But the problem is you can never control someone else's actions.
Yeah, I mean, it brings up for me. I mean, one of the things I do in my work, as an intuitive coach, we look at fundamental beliefs, that not that we're born with, but that we create, that we establish as part of our identity. And
Mhm.
it's going to be on the scope here, but there's 12 fundamental beliefs, that we all have some of them. Things like I'm not worthy of love, I'm not good enough, I can't trust people, I can't trust myself, right? So these yeah these beliefs, and one of them is, as you speak of, some of them really deal with control, and they because there's a part of us that, as children or as infants, we don't really have control, right? We have to get our food, our shelter, our love from something outside of us.
Mhm.
And so that's what we learn, right? It's like mommy and daddy, or the proverbial, the surrogate mommy and daddy. If you don't have those figures, right? They're kind of wired into us to need, to require, and we, if we're alive, we we certainly got food, shelter, and love. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Now, people may be very, very damaged, and not gotten adequate aspects of those, but and so we those things are out of our control for a significant portion of our lives, right? I mean, maybe you can start to learn how to cook or prepare some cereal or whatever it is at a relatively young age, but you're not going out to to procure it, and to to do it, to everything. And so it takes us a long time to get to that stage, and so then we go through this. It's like all of a sudden, at whatever age it is, 16, 18, for some people 35, when it's like you're out, and now you go do all this stuff. And we don't have models that really support, show people, demonstrate to people. And that's why we have dating coaches like you, to help people see, this idea of connecting. Because I think we often think, certainly, the apps, the TV shows. It's like, oh, I've got to go look pretty, or be amazing, or have a lot of money, or have this, that, the other, and then
Mm.
I'll attract all these, I'll prove to this person, my mate, whatever it is. And there's nothing wrong with being attractive. There's nothing wrong with having money and nice things, but it's not really what gets to, certainly long term.
Exactly. And I think it comes back to this worthiness and that sense of identity. Because one thing I have learned is a lot of the elements of where things goes wrong in relationships is it's the way that you see yourself, and it becomes the role that you end up playing. So, for example, if you're always scolded for mucking up as a child, like, oh, you always spill your milk everywhere and this, that, and the other. If you're always treated in that manner of, oh, you've done this wrong, that's awful, now you've got to go and fix it, and there's all this negative experience, where you have this person then with this real harsh inner critic of, oh, I can't get anything right, and then that creates the role or the story that they overlay on what they see, versus, oh, whoopsie daisy, you spilt the milk, never mind, we're just going to move it there. And you have someone with more of a problem solving outlook, and someone who is able. So it's kind of understanding the constructs of that identity, the way that's showing up, the role that it's being played out. Because the funny thing is, the role that's played out isn't just, relationships, it's friendships, it's work, it's career, it's hobbies, anything that you interact with. And understanding how that's playing out in the patterns. And it's also understanding the emotional calibration as well. So, for example, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but if you find out those moments where you've been like super happy and super ecstatic and everything feels absolutely freaking amazing, and all of a sudden, bam, you just have this weird thought that's like, whoa, that's gut wrenching. Like, what on earth was that? And it's the brain literally bringing down those chemicals, going, you're not meant, this cocktail of the chemicals you need to have, it's not meant to be up here. We need to bring that down, because that's where you usually are. This is your identity, this is who you are. And it's kind of bringing you back to that sense of, I am a body. This is, I am, I'm spiritual, I'm energy, or whatever that might be.
Yeah. So I just want to get back to, because I really like these 4 C's you spoke about, and so this is around relationship, creating a lasting relationship. So compatibility, that makes sense. We have to be compatible physically, emotionally, intellectually, and communication. I think we've kind of heard this for a long time, right? That the value of communicating, but I think I'm curious to hear, because obviously it's not just communicating, right? There's more depth to communication, and maybe to the compatibility. Let's sort of take them in turn.
Yeah, so let's go compatibility first. So I think that's always the starting point of where I take my clients through, and I refer to compatibility as, imagine going on a long journey. You want to make sure that you've got the same postcode or zip code, wherever you're listening from. You want to make sure that you're going to the same place. You want to make sure that you're enjoying the same transport. You want to make sure, so you've got similar lifestyle. You want to make sure that you're listening to similar music. So your rules and stuff like that you abide by life, whether it's like your beliefs, your values, whatever that might be. And you want to make sure that you're going in the same direction together. And I think one thing that's really important for people to understand is, at the end of the day, you're 2 very individual individuals. You're not meant to merge as one person. Okay, so that's where you get the codependency. But what you are meant to be is like these 2 people who've decided to travel together in life. So you're not responsible for each other's happiness. You're literally traveling towards something, and enjoying that journey of achieving things as individuals and also as a couple. And this is where a lot of people go wrong. They go, oh, I wonder why that relationship ended. Well, so yeah, he's got a different postcode to you. What were you expecting? Or well, this person, they didn't believe in being polite and manners. So they had completely, different beliefs and values. This person was more motivated to, be ambitious, and you're very family orientated. Or, it's kind of like looking at all these little bits and pieces so you can actually enjoy life going in flow with each other
Mm,
versus pushing against each other. And I think one of the words that tends to come up a lot in relationships is, well, you're meant to have compromise and this, that, and the other. It's like, no one's
mm,
meant to be the martyr in the relationship. It's kind
mm,
of, quite patriarchal and quite old fashioned. It's actually, you've got two equals in a relationship who are able to collaborate. This is where the collaborate bits,
mm.
bits and pieces come in, where you can collaborate together to get the result that's good for you, both of you, but also the relationship.
Yeah, that just I read a book, I don't know, a long time ago, a few decades ago. I think it was Thomas More's Care of the Soul,
Mm,
from the, I think, the 90s. And the I don't really remember anything of it except that it introduced that concept, which was like, I mean, I was in my 20s, I guess, I don't know. And it was completely novel to me that he suggested that there are three parties in a relationship.
mm,
There's you, there's your partner, and then there's the relationship
yes.
itself. That sort of combined amorphous entity that only exists because the two of you have chosen to come together. And what he said that was so kind of revolutionary to me was, that means not necessarily one third, one third, one third on some strict level, but that each of you actually have to look after three parties.
Yes.
And so, you know, imagine we're in a relationship. Taylor needs his time, Lily needs her time, and then we need our time or our energy, our focus. And because,
Yeah.
as you say, we're individuals. So there are the times when I got to go off and be with my friends, my family, do my hobbies, da da da. And, hopefully for I don't know why I'm putting us in a relationship, but I guess it's just easy.
We'll go with it.
No pressure. But no, like, and then, you're saying, great, I really want this for you, right? There's this part of saying, okay, today we're going to talk about what's going to work well for Taylor. Like, oh, he needs Friday evenings to go see his friends, or Saturday afternoons to play this. And
Yes.
then Lily needs her Tuesday evenings to go to the, whatever, the theater, the gym, or, whatever it is. And then we say, okay, here's the time where we come together.
Yeah.
And that sense of, yeah, like there are these real, it's like a triangle, right? And it can kind of move around. I mean, triangles, like you can play with, like, on computers, right? You can play like with the vertices,
Mm-hmm.
the vertices of a triangle, and you can make it look from like a completely equilateral triangle to some square triangle to some really, really extended triangle. But at the end of the day, it always has just three angles, three points, three vertices, right? And you can kind of move around with that over time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it also, like going back to the awesome point of you making, like there's three three entities in the relationship. It's also that thing of what is it that you need as an individual to show up as your best self?
Mm,
And it's like, okay, like you were saying, like time away, the gym, this, that, and the other.
mm,
And it's being able to be in a place where you can look after yourself so you can give more.
mhm,
And I think you think about it, how many people go through life where they're exhausted, where they're stressed,
mhm,
where they're stressed, depressed, whatever it might be. And then they're going, okay, well, now I want to enjoy this relationship from this space. And it's like, oh, well, if you haven't got a healthy relationship with yourself first, how on
mhm,
earth do you expect to either, number one, connect, because you're ignoring the things that you need as a human being to be you and to be the best version of you?
mhm.
And number two, is your partner going to want to connect with that? And
Yeah.
it kind of causes this element of, okay, I need to be able to make them happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how many people have done that where they've gone into the relationship, or they've said, oh, I need to be in a relationship so I can be happy, or my partner's not happy, I need to take responsibility for their happiness
Mm.
because they were happy when they were single before they met me, or whatever. It must, and it's taking it personally, and it's like that element of that collaboration. That's why that accountability piece is so important, when it
Mhm.
comes to looking after yourself, being responsible for yourself, even including your words, actions, and emotions, and all those different things, to then be in a place where you're a whole individual and you can collaborate together as a couple.
Mm.
Because your individual strengths and your individual weaknesses will be the strengths and weaknesses of the relationship.
Mm. Mm. And I think I don't know where this fits in, and maybe in consideration. So I'm curious to hear what this means for you, um, because there is this all, you know, one of the beautiful things about a relationship is that somebody else knows you, and knows you
Mm.
in a very different way than you know yourself, right? In the same way that, you know, maybe a sibling knows you, or your best friend that you've known since you were 7, right? There are things that we, you know, I focus on Taylor as a particular thing because it's what I see today, or what my worries are, or the job I have to do, or, you know, the work I have to do. And I can sort of become blind to, unaware of all these other things that may either be holding me back, or that I'm neglecting, that would really, really help me in the situation. And, you know, that opportunity for somebody else, right? When we're going through the struggle, or even when we're having you know, an amazing time, for somebody else to have this perspective, to, you know, that love, and to me, that's consideration. I don't know if that's what you mean by that.
Yeah.
Of yeah, having somebody else, you know, it kind of gives you more, um, gives you more scope in your own life. You know, I mean, yes, I'm responsible for my happiness, but my partner can help me see where I'm doing that well, or where I may be missing some things in that. Not to take the responsibility for that, not to be responsible and say, okay, well, that's for me to do, but to
Mm.
say, hey, by the way, did you notice this, or have you thought about this, or do you remember that you know, you have this wonderful attribute that you're not even considering.
Yes, exactly. And I quite like John Gottman's work around this, around, you know, being able to, you know, see someone who, you know, see your partner who looks sad, and it's okay to even just ask them, are
Mhm.
you okay? What's going on? And exploring that together, and to give the, you know, to give each other the space to go, okay, well, what is it that you need? Because it's not about, like, you know, self-sacrificing your needs. It's about being fulfilled yourself, but finding out, what does the relationship need to be able to grow?
Mhm.
And I think that consideration piece for me is like, when you're making those decisions for the relationship or for yourself, it's also you're considering your partner, you're considering the relationship in the process.
Mhm.
Because there's nothing worse than being with someone who doesn't consider you.
Mhm.
Because what that does is it breaks down the trust, which also breaks down the commitment.
Mhm.
That's not saying, okay, I'm committed to the relationship. That's saying I'm more committed to myself, and you're going to suffer as a result.
Mhm. Well, I think that's, you know, sort of there. Yeah, it's like it's putting that triangle we spoke about. I mean,
Mm.
I think those angles can kind of move around over time, right? It's not about having it fixed and saying this is how the triangle looks today, and it's always going to look like that.
Yes.
But if it's heavily skewed day in, day out towards one person, yeah, that's
Mhm.
where.
Yeah, I think I love that, because, you know, I think people do have, and I certainly did in the past, this very fixed mindset of a relationship should always be this way. And if you go outside the rules, or if you go into these gray areas, well, that's terrible. That's the end of the relationship, or that threatens the relationship. And the truth is, you think about people in general, you know, we never stay in the same emotion for a long time. You know,
Mhm.
speaking for myself, yeah, mine changed, you know, drastically in 5-10 minutes. And you know, if we think about that, when we're bringing two human beings together who also are constantly changing, the relationship is going to be all over the freaking place anyway. You know,
Mhm.
it's finding how to work together with like, going back to your, like, soup making example, is finding how to work together with the ingredients that you've got, and finding out what's the best recipe for these particular ingredients, because it's not going to be the same for you know, different combinations.
Yeah. One of the things that I've learned, which I mean, I've learned it the hard way, I would say, but like with communication, I by nature I'm a very serious person,
Mm,
and I'm very heady. So I try to prove things by logic and say no, 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 but you said this, and then I said this, and maybe that's true, maybe it's not true, maybe I'm misremembering something. But I have this kind of assumption. It's like no, 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 we agreed this, and that was what we said. Whatever, 2 days, 6 weeks ago, 5 years ago, and and
mhm.
and I don't necessarily take into consideration. Oh well, maybe things have changed. Maybe you've changed. Maybe I've changed. Maybe the whole world's changed, or something. And the what I've learned, I mean, there is kind of learning from that, but what I've really learned is the ability to laugh. So
Mm,
bringing humor into my seriousness. Like I've had to learn, because my seriousness really damaged. I mean, it damaged me personally. It damaged relationships. There's a time to be serious, but that in my communication, the successful relationships I've had, personal, professional, intimate, are when I've brought humor, and I think humor is ultimately a sense of humility, and
mm,
which and I think I could be wrong, but because I did some research on this, I think all of the humor, humility, human, they all have the same root, and it goes to our humanness, that and it actually it has this sort of weird cycle. Like when we're able to be humble about ourselves, which is not being weak, which is not you know making taking ourselves down or out.
mm.
It's just being, like you were saying earlier, being vulnerable to learn, to listen, all these things.
Yeah, and it's quite funny. Like I learned this really cool technique around this because my past very was very much the same. I was previously an accountant. Everything was black and white. Everything was listed. I mean, my family joke and said I should have been a lawyer. The way that I can list things out and put a case against them, great in an argument. I need to, what I think my mum used to turn around to me and said, yeah, you're very much what was it, win the battle, lose the war, or something, like that saying. And so one person actually shared this awesome technique with me. And it's literally in any situation where you feel emotionally charged, or you feel the need to be right, or something, something feels really heavy. It's coming back to what would love say.
Mm.
And that has been so powerful. I mean, I've been in situations where it's like, oh gosh, this person's really riled me up. They should have not done this, and don't they know this? And they from this place, and then literally, use that concept. What would love say? And it's like, ah, well, I'm so grateful for this opportunity. Da 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 da. I think this would be the best way for us to. And it literally changed the whole response because it was
Hmm.
coming from a different space, but
Hmm.
also the story was different.
Yeah.
It's like, instead of like this story of playing into the role, playing into the pattern, all of a sudden coming from the space of love and what would love say, guess what? You get heard. There's more openness, there's more humility, there's more space to be human.
Mm.
I think this is what people tend to struggle with. We have unwritten rules and unwritten beliefs of how things should be. And as soon as someone steps out of those expectations, there's the need to punish. There's the need to prove something, or to cause hurt, to stop that person from acting out of line again. And that again stems back to childhood. You think, if you did something wrong, there would be consequences.
Mm.
And we try to bring that into our relationships, when actually we need to remember we're adults and not children. And also, what it stops us doing is it stops us from being open. So, for example, I remember having a conversation with someone over a year ago about this, but they got very upset that their boyfriend was, staring at other women who were walking past. And the truth is, that wasn't the problem. The truth is, it was her perception of what that meant about her and what it meant about the relationship. Because the truth is, we're never going to suddenly be only attracted to one person. We're never going to be the most attractive attractive person in the world. There's always going to be other people, and it's being comfortable within yourself and coming back to that identity and that unconditional love, that you as a person and you as that identity is enough. That's enough to be worthy of love.
Yeah, it reminds me, I can recall actually a couple of girlfriends. I had very, very beautiful girlfriends who would often, I happy to look at beautiful women, but it's not like it's the only thing to do. But I do recall, like, there's a couple of girlfriends come to mind who I definitely felt like I was punching above my weight in beautiful women, and they would point out to me, somebody would walk by, like I might be in a conversation, and they would look and they say, wow, look at that woman. Look how beautiful she is. And part of me, it's like, oh, am I allowed to do this? Right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, no, she is really beautiful. But I think you're right. There is a sense. It's like, well, what is it? Maybe it does say something about that particular couple and their relationship. My father used to do that. He with his girlfriend. I when I was sort of in my 20s, I lived with my father, and he was I really had a sense, like he would just kind of watch women, but it would distract from the conversation. Anyway, could go on and on. Yeah, it's interesting what you hear to say, right? That have to say that what it says. There's more about what it means, or there's this assumption that this is what it means about the relationship, rather than, I suppose, it's an opportunity for communication, right? If a man's looking at other women, or if a woman's looking at other men, right? It's not to say it's only one way. Then it's like, oh, what do you find attractive in this woman? And is that something that you think is missing in me, or what is this about, right? Because that's an opportunity to say, maybe the guy says, well, I just appreciate looking at this, and this reminds me of why I'm with you. Or maybe everybody's free to do what they want. He says, actually, I realized I don't want to be with you.
It's even to let go of the comparisons.
Yeah.
Because as soon as we go into that thing, we're in that place of competing, and then we're competing for love, and we're competing for that intention. And what does that feel like in a relationship? It feels lucky, and it takes away from that conditional love. Sometimes it's just okay. And it's being okay with that. It's being okay with the human versions of, of who we actually are. And also, I think it kind of ties into a couple of things. So I've been very, very lucky to work with some amazing coaches and mentors. And something that really stuck out to me with one of the coaches I worked with was that he said, I'm not in love with my wife. I'm in love with the thoughts I have about my wife. And it was quite funny. It kind of spurred this conversation I had with my partner around reality. Like, what's reality, and what's the hologram that we're interacting with? What is love? Because if suddenly one of us didn't exist, or anything, what was it? I can't remember the exact conversation now, but it was something on the lines of, well, that's our relationship and our love only exists because we're there to be able to create it. If we hadn't met or anything like that, that wouldn't be that wouldn't be there. But it's understanding how we actually interact with it, and the way that we understand it, the way that we see it. It's almost like coming back to that thing of we never know if we see different colors the same way. And it's the same thing about the way that we see and interact with love. Kind of going a little bit on tangent here.
No, I get it. Somebody else was on the show recently. I can't remember what who it was of the episode, but was talking about this sense. In fact, because I had the second dating coach I've had on, which is really quite cool, right? Because you get different perspectives. It's like, it's such a massive field anyway. And I think it was that person, but it could have been somebody else who was talking about, it's like, you are sort of my projection of you, or like I exist as me, and maybe I have all of that sense, or quite likely I don't, because there are things that I'm not conscious of. But really, yeah, we're kind of in this eternal kind of like, well, I see this about you, but you're projecting, like we're always in this kind of projection of things, and it is very difficult um to kind of get to the bottom of that, or to see beyond that. um yeah.
Yeah, I think it kind of ties back into, like, we talk about compatibility. So I've got a compatibility matrix. I go into a few different areas, but one of the ones that's really important, it comes back to the values and beliefs. If you're playing by the same rules or seeing things very similar, got very similar beliefs, it helps with navigating those things. Because it doesn't matter if the projection or the way that you're seeing that relationship is different, but you're interacting in the same way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you have the opportunity to, well, I suppose that's where communication comes in, because that projection can exist, right? I see you and I assume that you have this quality or assumption about something, right? We can see the same event happen on the street, for instance. Two people interact and whatever happens, right? And in my mind, I say, I may make a comment, oh, well, there you go, right? And you say, yeah, there you go, right? But we may have two completely different ideas and interpretations about what's happening, and assume that just because we said something like, well, there you go, and you agreed or I agreed, we have the same view. And it's only as we get to that communication, oh, well, I saw this, right? The color. I was I am colorblind, and I really I didn't have any clue about that until sometime in my teens, and I remember people started saying, like, oh, that's a really nice red shirt you have on, for instance. And I said, what are you talking about? This is a brown shirt. And that's funny. And I thought, I had trust issues. I thought people were messing with my mind, and I kind of just ignored them. But it came up a few times, and I don't know. I was in a shop with a good friend of mine, and had like a hat or something on, like an olive hat, and he said, it's a nice green hat. And I was like, it's brown. And he said, it's green. I said, no, it's brown. And so we got some random shopkeeper and said, what color is this? She said, it's green. I was like, oh, okay. So, it was the first time I really became aware. But, there is that sense, like, we just assume things.
Yes.
We assume my green is your green, and that, my assumption about what's happening in the world, or, what somebody, when my boss said this, yeah, this is what it means. Or when my mother and I, got into this argument, right? This is exactly what it means. And you're supposed to agree with me 100%, because you're my partner, you're my girlfriend, boyfriend, wife, husband, whatever it is. And maybe not, right? It goes back to the humility of, like, well, maybe there's something to learn and all that.
I think as well, like, yeah, definitely like something to learn, because you think about the whole metaphor, the olive green hat. It's like, how many situations have we been in relationships where it's like, oh gosh, actually I need to have a look at this certain belief or this certain idea. Oh, well, maybe I'm not right. Maybe I need to understand, or even create my own meaning or my own understanding around this point. And this is the beauty of what happens in relationships, where there is that open communication and that space. Because it sounds like with your friend, it was like, okay, there's no judgment here, there's no anything like that. Look, it's this color. This is what I'm seeing. Cool, I'm going to help you. I'm going to get someone else in. This is the actual color, and you're able to then to calibrate.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, because as you're bringing this up, because it's a very close friend of mine from high school, and so we had a very sarcastic relationship with each other, and we were always playing jokes on each other. And I can actually remember. I remember, like, being in the shop and being quite hurt. Takes me back to my sensitive days. But but there was a part of me that didn't want to accept. It goes to this point, right? It's like, here's somebody who is actually offering, a version of the truth, or his version of the truth, and ostensibly for my benefit, and I don't want to accept it, because, as I said, I'd heard it a few times, and I had my own issues around trust. And when I'd heard this, I thought people were joking, pulling my leg, trying to make me feel bad or different. And people are, legitimately trying to help. And I could not see that, did not see that. I mean, it's a small issue, right? But it goes to the point, as you're saying, because we have these beliefs. And it was only because, if it had just been me and my friend, I probably to this day still wouldn't believe him. we're still friends. We've been friends since we were like 13 or 14.
Oh.
But because he just got to, actually, I didn't think at the time that he could have been some friend of his, or he could have paid an actress or something. But I just assumed it was a random stranger, and took her word for it when she came over and told me it was an olive hat. So yeah.
Yeah, and I love that you bring up the resistance as well, because you think about it, even again, when we're in those situations, we've had this belief and it's suddenly different. And it's almost like, I love using like a Rubik's Cube analogy. It's almost like, oh gosh, okay, this little segment of the Rubik's Cube's wrong. Well, that means this is going to change, this is going to change. And we've kind of got to integrate it. And that takes a big process. So yeah, we're going to resist it to begin with, to go, oh, well, that doesn't fit into my matrix at the moment. Cool, I need to work out how this is actually going to integrate into my life and the way that I'm going to see things differently now.
Yeah, I mean, and it goes to the point I was saying earlier, because I'm happy to laugh about it. I mean, it's a small issue, but it goes to the point. I mean, it's something I had to learn and to choose. I had to choose I had to choose humility. I had to choose humor, because I just had massive resistance. I wanted to be right. I wanted to prove my friend wrong. I mean, I grew up with that, sort of inner critic that I learned as well. And so, that inner critic that that you learn, that's modeled for you. What I found in my experience, and certainly working with others as a coach, is that you bring that, and that becomes that's your sort of default for everything, right? So I'm very good at criticizing myself, and then everybody and everything else.
Yes.
And it's small things like that where you start to realize, maybe the world is not 100% exactly as I assume it is. And I mean, it's a great example, right? Because nobody really gets hurt by wearing an olive hat or a brown hat. I assume. I don't know. I mean, there are fashion police out there, so maybe you get a ticket or something, and have to pay a fine to the fashionistas. But it's a great way. And so, for listeners, right there's always an opportunity, and it's often the small things that can make the most difference, right? Because they don't have the same weight of like, but you promised this, and it was,
Yes.
years of love or thousands of pounds that you owed me or something. It's like, it's just the color of a hat, But it really taught me this sense of like, oh, well, maybe I have something to learn, to be humble, and to bring, it's great to have a story like that, to bring humor into it.
Yeah, I think it comes back to this thing of exploring, because it's kind of understanding and accepting where people are as well. Like, for example, I remember one of the first years my partner and I got together, and we have it must, because we're both into psychology and understanding different things, we must have had about a 2-hour discussion on what sorry meant to us and what we would need in order to actually accept and appreciate an apology. And that was just mind-blowing, because it was so worlds apart, and it meant different things, and it had all these different things held to it in such different ways. And it's even understanding the difference in how just a simple word or a simple action can be so different for each person.
Well, and having lived in Britain for, I don't know, coming on whatever it is, 15 years, it is
the main word.
it is the most complex, the heaviest, and with all due respect, my least favorite word in the English language. But it's fascinating that you and your partner can sit down and have, I mean, I could imagine you spend 2 days or 2 weeks or 2 years talking about the intricacies of sorry, for the British nation, or United Kingdom, it is remarkable how much complexity and nuance and frankly potential for misunderstanding and like misunderstanding that goes along with a word that sort of seems quite, if you introduce that word to, you translate it to somebody, I don't know, who grows up with German or Japanese, or actually Japanese is a very apologetic society as well. But, you might just think, oh, okay, this is all it is.
Yeah, but it's like, even if it wasn't the word sorry, it's the way that you can collaborate again as a couple.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for example, and it comes back as well, like, culturally, and also like the childhood aspect. I mean, I think for my partner, it was very much, okay, the apology is almost a submission. You only apologize if you submit, and if there's a big event or something like that, you just leave the room, and then the next morning everything's going to be absolutely fine.
Right. Okay.
Right? And you've got the other one, which is like, okay, you say sorry when you really, really mean it, and you want that person to understand. So it's like understanding the intricacies of that and how they can actually, collaborate together. So, for example, like, and you can imagine the mismatch there of what that would have caused in the long term if that wouldn't have been addressed. So then we can actually turn around to each other and say, okay, well, if I was to say sorry, what is it that you actually need? What do you need in order to be able to say, okay, well, when I say this means this. And being able to actually integrate each other's needs and understanding of each other to be able to move that relationship forward. And this is like the difference of, because I find with a lot of couples, when they have conflict or when they have anything going wrong, they feel that that's a breakdown in the relationship, when actually it is an opportunity for that relationship to be stronger if there's that openness to have that conversation and to be able to have a little mini action plan of, okay, well, this is what we're going to do in future if this event arises.
Yeah, I think, for me, this is kind of like the biggest gold that we've kind of uncovered. It's taken us close to an hour to do so. And the value of sort of longer form podcast, because it really goes to what I think, I don't know if it's in these 4 C's or a combination, really goes to this kind of intangible sense of how to create and cultivate a relationship, because it comes from, and it comes from the sense of sitting down to talk about what something means. Like, okay, you have the value of honesty, I have the value of honesty. Two people could just say, cool, all right, we'll just leave it there, right? But what does that mean? What does that really mean, right? And not to say that a couple needs to say, okay, for the next 12 hours, all we're going to do is talk about what these values. No. But at the same time, I do get a sense, and relationships that I have been in that have been relatively short-lived are when two people don't take the time to really sit down, because it's like, well, we met out while we were, with these friends, and we go out and we do these activities, and so everything's kind of outward focused. It's like, well, when we go to this bar, we see our friends, or we play this sport, or we see these movies, and everything's like, yes, we're connecting because we like the same music, movies, or friends, and that's great. But the thing that really goes to it's compatibility, it's communication, it's it is consideration, collaboration, to say, okay, well, because it's like, when you say sorry, what is it you need? Now, I may or may not be able to provide that, but at least I know what you need in that, and I'm able to say, hey, I'm not able to give that to you, but are you aware that when you say sorry, that maybe you can get that from yourself or from somebody else, or whatever it is, because it really goes to like it gets into the much more sort of nuts and bolts, because you could spend 20 minutes on that and resolve potentially months of disarray and confusion, by being in that space to really get at what it means to, to have a particular value, and to really, understand what that means for each of you.
Yeah, and I think this is why they say, the first year of marriage is the hardest.
Right.
And it's literally, it's going, okay, so how's your rule book different to mine?
Mhm.
That's what we're discovering, because once we, once you're when you're in a relationship, once you discover what the rule book is, it's really hard to do things outside of each other's expectations. And that's often the route to arguments and issues. And the funny thing is, the main core element of any argument or issue that arises in a relationship is this element of, can I trust you?
Mm.
And it all boils down to that. But if there is that consideration, another layer of that for me is, does this person have my best interests at heart? And that's almost like the definition of trust for me, in terms of, is this person working in my best interests? So can I trust them? And it's same goes for our own self-trust as well. Am I acting in the best interests of me?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know, but I do assume that I am. I like, I don't know about faith and trust, but I do know about like assumptions and intentions. So I set in, because we're complex creatures, and things can get muddled. But I do assume, like, even when because I can do something and assume that I'm looking out for my best interest, and still trip up over myself and make an absolute mess of something.
Yes.
But if I say, well, I assume that I've done the thing, started a business, run a podcast, went on a date, taken a trip, invested in something. If I assume that I did that out of my best interest, and it completely flopped, it failed, it was a disaster, then it's an opportunity for me to say, okay, cool. So how, it goes back to sort of like, what would love say? Like, well,
Mhm.
what would my higher self say? Right. How could I use this? What's the learning here? Because if I assume that it's in my best interest, then there's something in it for me, rather than just to like hide it and try to forget all about it and cover it up, bury it, and say that never happened. Right.
Yeah,
Really
exactly.
like bring it out and be like, okay, well, yeah, that happened.
When you think about it in terms of like relationships, because we all trip up, and we all muck up in every freaking way possible. It's relationships for you. But how different is it when, if there was a mistake, if there was some sort of expectation that was unmet? How nicer is it knowing that the intention behind it was having their best interests at heart? Like, oh, sorry, I'm late. I wanted to go and get a bottle of wine for us to share tonight, or whatever it might be. And suddenly it takes the edge out of the issue of how you felt upset that they were outside your expectations. So there's
Yeah.
that space for being human, and also the space for forgiveness.
Yeah, and it takes me to a sense, because I do have that, I do work with that sort of frame now, that, an assumption and intention. And so if I get information or activities where it seems pretty clear that I didn't have that intention, then it's a real lesson for me to say, okay, well, what was my intention? Oh,
Yes.
my intention may have been to be really selfish there. Is that who I want to be? Is that what I choose for myself? In my relationship with my partner, my sibling, my coworkers, somebody on the street, right? Yeah, really, really interesting. Something I just wanted to say, and I just totally forgot it. Yeah, there's something you said brought me to something else. Now it's completely gone. So we're gonna have an awkward moment of silence, unless you can fill it with something.
It's always the way though, when there's so many different things coming up as a result of kind of like unearthing different topics. You often find that You end up losing one whilst you're talking about the other.
Exactly. Well, that's what I like about this podcast, this what we're creating, because there are, it is conversational, like it's totally unscripted, and there are times where, just like in a conversation, it's like, so well then, right, I'm just gonna go to the bowl of punch, right? Except we're sitting here, and it's like there aren't enough other people around in the room for us to say, sorry, Lily, I'm gonna talk to somebody else right now.
No, this is good. And I think we've covered some really lovely, deep concepts around love, communication, and connection. And I think it's helping, people to be more aware of that conditional and unconditional love. Being loved, putting that intention there, and connecting from that place of love versus conditioning or punishment.
Ooh, wow, yeah, takes me back to childhood.
I
can hear my mother. Taylor, I've told you to clean up your room. Anyway,
there you go.
I love my mom. But it's true. Like we all have those things, and I think there is, just kind of bring it full circle, this opportunity to, because it's like, to be things for other people, we have to be something for ourselves. To be loving to others, we ultimately have to be loving to ourselves.
I think it comes back to this concept. I don't know if you've ever heard of the stages of love.
No, maybe.
Level 1, and that's like self-serving. You do everything that's just for you. 2 is transactional. I'll do this if you do that. And how often do you hear that in relationships? And stuff like that? You've got to do that because I've done the dishes, or whatever it might be. Level 3 is this unconditional. I'm doing this because this is what I feel. I'm not expecting anything in return. I'm doing this because this is what I feel and this is what I want to do. And then you've got level 4, which is like Mother Teresa, complete enlightened love, where you'll love and see the love in absolutely everyone and everything. And most people tend to get stuck around level 1 and level 2. So if you try to love someone that's level 1, there's no consideration. If you're trying to love for someone at level 2, well, there's no trust. But if you're in a place of loving from level 3, you are someone that's comfortable within themselves. You feel capable as an individual, and you're able to love regardless of what the actions are of that other person, because you're responsible, accountable for yourself.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And level 4, I don't know, but
we're working on it. We'll have you back.
We're working on
level 4.
Level 4 is just impressive guru level. One of the things that I have been playing with level 4 is seeing the suffering first. Seeing the suffering first. What's caused this person to act in this way? Because I know it's nothing to do with me, but I know it's the story that they're telling themselves or the role that they're playing, and that's the result of the suffering that they've endured within their life. So I feel like that's something to do with level 4.
Yeah, I mean, in the work I do, I was talking to somebody about this last night. We tend to assume that when we have a discussion and there's stuff going, it goes back to that, projection we were talking about. It's like, we think it's personal. You say something and we think it's personal about me, but it's usually just structural, right? If you look at the set of circumstances, what that person had for breakfast, the interaction they had in their car, maybe the bill or the letter they got in the mail that day, and what happened to them the day before, and blah, 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 all the way back to birth. It's almost impossible for them to do anything but what they did. And so if they happen to blow up at you, well, that's all like it's structural. It's not about you. And so it does go to that sense of not taking it personally and just saying, okay, well, what is this person actually going through?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, Lily, well, there's much more we could discuss, but I think like that feels like a good place to call it a day.
Perfect. We've certainly covered a lot.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. Thanks so much for your time, and we'll
Thank
see
you.
you somewhere down the road.
Sounds great. Thank you.